Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode 177. My name is Matt, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. And in this week's episode, I have a topic in mind that I've been sort of following for the last few months. But before I get into that, if you haven't checked out last week's episode, I had the great opportunity to interview Jeff Stevens, who is an Atlas missile expert. And that was a wonderful experience for me. It was great to be able to talk with Jeff a little bit about some local history, about history of Cold War history. We had a good time talking, and the video for that is available on the YouTube channel, and the audio podcast you can find over at podnuts.com. So in this week's episode, what I'm going to do is I'd like to talk about the latest release of the Apple iPad Pro 12.9 inch. Now, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that I've been sort of keeping my eye on the 2020 release for the iPad Pro. And the reason for that is because in the middle of a huge grant project for the music organization that I founded. And we were looking at purchasing a bunch of these for a jazz orchestra. And so the ultimate goal was to use them as PDF music readers because they're sort of the perfect size for digitizing music and such. And the real reason I've been keeping my eye on this is because of that. About 6 months ago or so, we were able to purchase 5 of the 2018 model. That was sort of part of the plan to test everything to make sure it would work as needed. And we knew that at some point in 2020, the latest iteration of the iPad Pro would come out. And I wasn't able to talk about it last week because we had Jeff on as the host, but Apple did release on March 18th the iPad Pro 12.9 2020 version. And again, the Pro models, it's a 12.9 inch screen. There is an 11 inch Pro model as well. And some of the things that we're looking at is just kind of the standard 12 megapixel cameras, 6 gigs of RAM, which is nice, and the 9720 milliamp battery, which is also great as well. So it was released on March 18th, and the iPads were available on the 24th. So a lot of people are starting to get these devices and work into them a little bit. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about them today and tell you what I think about them. Not much has changed in the form factor for the iPad, which I think is great. I love the form factor of the 12.9 inch in the 2018 model. So basically what we're looking at, and sort of what I assumed in previous episodes when I talked about this, is that we're just kind of looking at a spec bump, so to speak, for the 2020 model. Apple is pushing a lot of things here, and one of the things that I think they're headed towards is they want iPads to become your computer replacement. We've talked about this for years. I even did an episode not too long ago about why I have difficulty using tablets. Now, I think there are things being changed in this version of the iPad and in iOS itself that will make a lot of things a whole lot easier, but we'll see how it goes. One of the things that I found interesting was the new Keyboard Folio for the iPad has a better angle, and the iPad itself is sort of hovering above the keyboard, and I think this is a great idea. And if you're watching the YouTube video version, I have a picture of it up, but basically the iPad now has a better angle, as if you were looking at a monitor instead of looking more straight down at the keyboard. The iPad is sort of elevated a little bit based on a hinge that has been put in that allows to do that in the keyboard case for the iPad. So the iPad Pro, there's a lot of things that are sort of becoming standard now with the True Tone display. You're looking at the ultra low reflectivity of the screen. A lot of these things have been in iPads for a long time, like the liquid retina technology in the 11-inch and 12.9-inch. But there's a lot of things that have been added here that I'm quite interested about. And one of those things is the addition of a LiDAR sensor in the camera area for the iPad. Now, what this will ultimately do using LiDAR will eventually lead to things like better augmented reality apps. And I'm not really a person that knows much about the augmented reality app. I've played with them on and off, but supposedly this will make scanning a room and using the augmented reality apps, helping them become more realistic and placing items in certain locations, such as a table or the floor, that type of thing. So there are a lot of benefits to this. So that's one thing that I'm looking at is LiDAR scanning. So if you're not sure what LiDAR is, light detecting and ranging, is used to determine distance by measuring how long it takes light to reach an object and reflect back. So it's been used by NASA for a very long time. And all of this information can be found on Apple's website, talking about exactly why they think LiDAR is important. And I have a feeling that as things unroll over here over the next few months, that the new iPhones will also have this in their cameras as well. The thing that I'm really interested about is the addition in iPadOS 13.4, which allows you to use trackpads. So you're going to see a lot of the keyboard designs now having a trackpad on them. One of the things that I still do to this day with the 9.7-inch iPad that I have a Zag keyboard case with it, and I constantly am looking for a trackpad thinking it's a laptop, and it obviously is just not there. But with iPad OS 13.4, it allows you to have a trackpad using a cursor on the iPad, making it more of a sort of laptop replacement. And so I'm real interested in that there is a new Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro. I have not had a chance to review any of this stuff, but basically the new iPads with the new A12 Bionic chip, they are meant to have a performance increase, and a lot of people are reporting that the performance is better compared to the last iPad. However, it's not as much of a increase as one would expect. The thing here that I sort of want to address is, there's the physical changes of the iPad are minimal, but the hardware and specs of the iPad really lead me to believe that this device will become more useful as time goes on. As earlier I was showing the specs here, the 6 gigabytes of RAM for the 12.9 issue of the iPad. It's really going to make this a device that is this device longevity wise will be something that can be used for years. The one thing that I really like is the fact that they have eliminated the 64 gigabyte version of the iPad. Now it's just 128 gigabyte, 256 gigabyte, 1 terabyte storage. They have eliminated the 64 gigabyte, which is great. And my ultimate question was, what would the ultimate cost of that be? Would they raise the prices or would they keep them the same? So taking a look at some of the other things that they have here, again, they have the Wi-Fi and LTE models of the iPad. This is pretty standard stuff at this point in time. that A12Z Bionic chipset. They have 8 cores, the Apple GPU. Really, there's not a whole lot of things that are new here in the iPad. But I'm excited about it for a lot of different reasons. And here's why. The silver space gray is something that I've always been a fan of. I like the way it looks, flat round edges. All these things, liquid retina display, are things that if you're an iPad user, you're very familiar with. The cameras, I love the fact that it's these, we're in 4K, so I can use these iPads to record in multiple settings. If I wanted to do that, I can do. It does record in 4K. I can do 1080p. I can use iPads as in the future, if I'm thinking music wise, I usually record my concerts with I think my video camera is 720p or 768p, something like that, and 728p, 720p. The thing is, we're not quite full high def in that with that camera, and it's very easy to set up an iPad to record. You can even use a couple of them and record different angles and go back and video edit it, and then you're starting to have a more higher production value. The LiDAR scanner is very interesting to me. Wondering where that's going to go down the road. Are other apps going to take advantage of this LiDAR scanner? And I would love to take this out and see what I can do with it. I suspect right now that the LiDAR scanning is limited, but I would be very curious on what you could do with it if Apple opens it up for developers, not only for AR experiences, but for other things. So that is, I'm interested in the fact that they had put this in and where they're going to go with it. I'm skeptical right now on what it's going to be used for and how useful it will be, but I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what's going to happen. The best part about this that I found is the price points are exactly the same. And currently the iPad Pro 12.9 inch is the same price as the 2018 version, even with the price bump or the spec bump, as well as the 6 gigabytes of RAM going from 64 gigabytes to 128. It really is what I was hoping for as far as the new model. So for me, the longevity of these iPads is something that I was concerned with, and it looks like this is a device that will, if taken care of, could last between 5 and 10 years in certain circumstances. And the circumstances that I need to use these for is something that very likely could let these devices last a decade. And I'm hopeful that if my grant funding were to come through within the next few months, that these will be the perfect fit for what I was looking for. I'm glad that the price is the same, and I'm hoping that in the future these prices don't go up and they will come down a little bit. And I'm also hoping that finding a good sale, you can maybe even get that price down a little farther. Now, Apple is Apple. The prices are higher than other devices, and that's unfortunate. You could easily get an Android device that are spec'd equivalently to the iPads for very much cheaper. And it's all a matter of preference as far as Android versus iOS. So we're not going to get into that today. But the iPad Pros are available now. And because of the current situation around the world, they didn't have a huge press release for it. And I almost missed it about 10 days ago or so. At this point in time, I saw the press release for this, and not really much was said about it right away. And I just happened to catch the fact that the new model's released. Other price points: iPad Pro 11 is $799 for the 128 gig model. So that's price is much cheaper, starting at $799, I should say. The thing that I'm most concerned about is, there's lots of articles out there right now on, why you should still stick with the 28 version of the iPad Pro. And it's a good point to consider, if you were a student, or if you were somebody on a budget, somebody who didn't have the funding for the full-blown iPad Pro 12.9, the 2020 version, you can still get a very usable device that is extremely powerful at a much cheaper price. So I think, if you're looking at the difference between the 2020 and the 2018 version, that, if you're looking at price as the number one contributor to what you're going to purchase, the 2018 version, and I will tell you, is probably the best iPad that I have ever used, and it is perfectly suitable for just about everyday situations. So just because of the price, the spec bump, doesn't mean that these older versions that are still out there available to be purchased are not perfectly usable devices. And if you're looking to save a little bit money, the 2018 version of the iPad Pro is something that definitely is worth checking out. So that is my look at the 2018 iPad Pro compared to the 2020 iPad Pro that was just released. Just a spec bump was exactly what I was hoping for. I did not want a huge jump in capability for the 2020 iPad, because that would have definitely bumped the price. And with me as a business owner trying to find funding for iPads, keeping that price down as low as possible, and whether it's using educational discounts or finding sales or that type of thing, it was real important to me that the next version of iPad was not a huge increase in price. The 128 gigs as the base model, which is what we would be purchasing, is great because it allows more flexibility in what we were going to do with these. The 64 gigabyte models were perfect for what we needed. Now we have a little bit more room, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to trying one of these out. Unfortunately, at this point, all the stores are closed around my area and around everywhere pretty much at this point. But if I happen to try one of these out, I'll mention it on the show and let everybody know what I think. So have you tried the new iPad 2020? And let me know. I will be very interested in hearing what you think about the iPad 2020 and kind of go from there. So, all right. So here's the thing. I'm going to be releasing podcasts at a much greater clip at this point in time. One of the things that I want to recommend is you check out my website, mrptechreviews.com. That's the website where I post all the shows. I post information. There's links to YouTube. There's my Patreon, links to my Patreon page. There's a donate button at the top of the screen. If you'd like to support the show, we would greatly appreciate that. Contact button, you can contact me, or you can just send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com. Lots of great things happening here, and hope to increase the pace of putting out a show. So thanks everybody for listening. That's going to do it for this time, and we'll see you next week.